I'm Julie Lyles Carr, and you're listening to the Modern Motherhood podcast from All Mom Does. I have this recurring dream. I have this dream so often. I wish I could tell you exactly how often, but it feels like at least once every couple of weeks, maybe once a month. And the dream is this. My husband and I, years ago, had this house that was a major fixer-upper. We were living in Oklahoma at the time, and our first 6 kids all lived in this house. This was before we had the twins. And so I have this dream about that house. I dream that I go back to that house and I walk in the door and it's so familiar, and I'm sort of confused at first when I first get back to this house because it feels so real and it feels like we are living there again after all of the adventures that we've had on the other side of having lived in that house. All of a sudden it feels like I've come back and maybe this is where we're going to live again. And the rooms are so familiar to me, and the door that always stuck on that particular closet still sticks, and those little gouges in the wall that one of the kids made from running into the wall while they were rollerblading inside the house, those gouges are still there. Everything about that house feels so familiar. Now, often during the stream, I will also discover that there have been a room or two added on. And I'm always so curious about these rooms that have been added on to this house that seems so familiar. And when I wake up from this dream and I realize it was a dream, I'm always pulling out my dusty psychology degree, trying to figure out exactly what it is that I'm processing through the dream or trying to understand. Now that house, along with the first little house that we built, along with the townhouse we lived in, along with the first apartment that Mike and I had when we first got married, many of the places that I have lived before, I've had the opportunity to go back and see from the outside. And some of those places have continued to look very familiar. It may be that tree that we planted, it's a lot bigger now, or it may be that those shrubs that we put in, somebody's pulled out. But for the most part, all of these places that I lived, whether in childhood or in my married adult life with Mike, have continued to seem very familiar to me. Well, I recently have had a really wild experience. The house that my parents lived in for 2 decades, the house I was living in when I graduated from high school, the house that was the final house before I moved out to get married and start a family of my own, that house went on the market. It's up in Utah. That's where I graduated from high school from. That's where my parents lived for a long time because of my dad's career in the rocket industry and the closeness, the geographic closeness to the Bonneville Salt Flats. That's where his company was able to test a lot of the things that they worked on. So for my last year and a half of high school, we lived in Utah. And then my parents went on to live there for a long time afterward. That house, it went on the market. And through a series of events, I was just piddling around looking at some things on Google Maps. I just happened to be looking at some of the houses from my childhood and seeing how the terrain had changed and remarking on how much those houses look still very similar to my memory of when I was a kid. I just happened to put in the address of that house and it popped up on a real estate site. And not only did it pop up, it had over 40 pictures of the interior of that house. And it was really wild. It was not like that dream that I told you that I had about that fixer-upper house that Mike and I had in Oklahoma. No, this picture carousel from the real estate site of this house that had been my parents' house for over 2 decades up in Utah, it showed a house radically changed. Radically changed. I don't know that if you had pulled me up to the driveway of that house and shown it to me in person, I'm not sure I would have recognized it. They have completely redone the front exterior of the home. It looks completely different. They made a very large addition to one end of the house. They've wrapped the house in multiple porches that are accessed through a series of stairs on the back of the house. And then I actually got to virtually go inside because of all of these real estate pictures. And when those pictures started to pop up and I started to look at them, it was such a strange feeling. The layout of the downstairs is still the very same as it was when I lived there and when my parents lived there. And interestingly, some of the toilets are still the same. I thought that was really odd. That really fascinated me. But so much of that house has been redone. The carpet is different. The walls are different on that first floor. I can still see and identify the really beautiful millwork, the trim work that my dad so lovingly did for my mom in the formal living room, and the drapes that my mom created and sewed, which were so gorgeous, so custom. They're actually still hanging in those rooms. But so much of the rest of the house is radically different. There's been a whole addition to the house that is now the master bedroom area. And one of the rooms that was my brother's room, they've reconfigured it. And another of the rooms that was my other brother's bedrooms has completely changed. The room that was the master bedroom is no longer the master bedroom. It's a kid's bedroom. All of those things were so wild to see. It was so unsettling in a sense to see something that is so familiar, this home that was my parents' home for over 20 years, and to be able to recognize several elements of it and feel that cry for home in my own heart, like, oh, that's where my dad hung that, or that was what my mom chose. But then to realize that so much of the rest of it is so different. I've got to tell you, as we get ready for the coming out of some of the corona crisis, and we are pressing toward things that we expect and want to feel normal again, I got to be honest with you. I think we're going to be emerging into a world that is very, very changed. Now, for some of us, we have a really interesting collision of emotions when it comes to looking at coming back out, opening up. Some of us feel a little ambivalent about it. Maybe we weren't crazy about going into, our shelter in place kind of situation when it originally started, but now we found a pretty good rhythm to it and we're kind of liking it. And the thought of coming back out, it develops some feelings of anxiety for us because we've gotten into a good routine in what we've been doing. Some of us cannot wait to get back out. I have friends who are chomping at the bit. They want to get back to how they feel like things were. They want to get back to being able to do big events and attend big events. They want to see their businesses full the way that they once were. They want to be able to go out to a restaurant without having to make any real accommodations, just be able to walk in and sit down and be in a crowded, buzzing room with people. They can't wait. And then there are people who very much are dreading this. They're still extremely concerned about all the pathogen of this virus. They may themselves have gotten sick or had a loved one who was sick with it, and they are just truly filled with dread about heading back out and people they care about heading back out into a situation which, let's face it, there are still so many unknowns. No matter where you land on any of this, politically or scientifically or anecdotally, the reality is this story is still being written. This story is not done. This story is not all buttoned up and laced up and put into the annals of history as a completed season. It's still ongoing. So what do we do with that? What do we do with all of the different emotions as our nation, as our states, as our cities and communities begin to open back up a little bit with so much debate and so much controversy still in place about the when and where and if all of that should be happening? Well, I have 5 things that I want us to consider as we look at coming back out as we've been hunkered down for so many weeks now. The first one is this. I've been asking myself, what truly is the goal in all of this? What is the point in everything that we've been going through? And what is the goal in coming out the other side of it? And one of the things that I've been having to really settle in my own heart is this. As a follower of Jesus, is a return to normal supposed to even be my goal? In my walk with God, one of the things that I just continue to find him teaching me is he generally is not a God of stasis. Have you ever noticed this? I mean, it may be raining buckets one day, and it may be glorious blue skies the next. From season to season, We have temperatures that can be frigid and cold and move into a climate that's so warm and lovely, into a climate that is so hot that we've got our ACs running all the time. When I look at the development of my own kids, how quickly they moved from being little infants to being crawlers to being toddlers, and now these kids I have that have launched onto their own and are adults, none of this is in stasis. None of God's creation is in stasis. And so when I look at this idea of, well, is the whole point of everything we've been through, the sacrifices that have been made, the challenges, the emotional toll, has the whole goal only been to try to get back to a place of normal? I've got to tell you, for me, no, that's not my goal. And I'm not trying to speak for everyone or talk about everybody's faith journey, but if that has been your whole goal, can I just lovingly challenge you that maybe that's just not a big enough goal? I think as followers of Christ, our goal is to always be glorifying and emulating Him so that the world takes notice and says, wow, when everybody else is unsettled, when everybody else is frustrated, when everybody else is responding in certain ways, why is this person calm in all of it? Why is this person seeking to make life even more abundant, seeking to find ways that are even more serving, seeking to find ways that are even more hopeful and positive than simply going back to quote unquote normal? You know, I find that it's easy to trust when things are familiar, but that's not really trust, is it? See, if all we've been longing for is quote unquote normal, then I have some concerns that we are not being completely trustful of our God. And then, and I don't mean this from an integrity standpoint, I mean it from what I'm going to call my second thing I want us to consider. I mean it from a memory standpoint. Is it even really truthful? Really? We'll get right back to the interview in just a moment. I got a care package in the mail that came just in time to engage in some self-care right when I needed it most. I've gotten to try the new 3 Graces lip glosses and a couple of their other skincare products, and I absolutely love them. 3 Graces products are made of ingredients that are healthy, so I don't have to worry about toxins. And here's the other thing I love. 3 Graces' mission is not just to treat your skin, but to lift your soul. It's this beautiful combination of amazing beauty products with faith, developed by 2 women who understand the source of true beauty. Find out more by going to 3gracesbeauty.com. That's 3 as in the number 3, not the word, 3gracesbeauty.com. You know, when I think about that house that my parents lived in, I have been tempted since looking at those pictures to try to create in my memory, remembering a time that, oh, when we lived in that house and it was at the base of the mountain and that house was this and that house was that and it was amazing and our family time together and on and on. And you know what? Some of that is very true. I do have some really sweet memories of living in that house. But the other thing that actually taking a look at those photographs that show what the house is like now activated in me was remembering as well the challenge of that season that I lived in that house. For me, I moved in at a time that I was in the middle of my junior year of high school, and it was my 3rd high school. My dad's career had taken us from California to Washington, D.C., and then to Utah at the very end of my high school experience. And I've got to tell you, when you're already a hormonal teen, and then you go through moving to one high school, getting adapted, getting adjusted, things beginning to quote unquote feel like normal, and then you go through another huge seismic change, you're not at your angsty best. Can I just say it that way? I mean, I was angry, livid, frustrated that we moved there. I didn't fit into that culture well at all. I didn't understand all the dynamics that were going on. My high school was so radically different than the high school I had attended in the Washington, D.C. area and the high school that I had attended outside the Los Angeles area. I was angry and frustrated. And yes, my family had some awesome times. We got these incredible ski passes to go to the ski resort that was just right over the pass. And there were things about my high school there that I came to love. And geographically, it was one of the most spectacular looking places I ever lived. It was a great house, the house we were living in. And I do miss those days of still living in that situation with my mom and dad, with my brothers, that last little bit before you take flight. But I wouldn't be being completely truthful if I acted like that experience was all pansies and roses and cute puppies. It wasn't. And in my work in ministry, I'm pretty fascinated because I have some people in my world who are so longing to go back to what they call normal. But these are some of the folks that I was talking with and mentoring and being part of their lives back when it was quote unquote normal. And can we just be honest? It wasn't all good. For most people, I think we can say there was a trending toward being way too busy, being way too stretched, being pushed too far in the limits of our calendars. There were too many nights that we weren't gathering as families around our home for dinner. There were too many Sundays that we were rushing out the door to get to a church service, but then not really taking the time afterward to unpack it. And I hear from some families now that their online church experience has been so much more robust because they are not outsourcing the spiritual experience onto a church. They're taking responsibility for it in their own home. And the conversations that are proceeding from that are so powerful. So when we take a look at what we're heading toward as we begin to open things back up, I'm challenging myself and I want to challenge you. Let's be honest that whatever we're calling normal wasn't necessarily the end-all be-all anyway. It had room for improvement itself. Now, you may have been in a season that was really going well, and that's great. But I think we can all agree that there are still things, even in seasons that are going well, that deserve our attention, that can be improved upon, that are lessons we're supposed to be learning from. It makes me think about when God took the Israelites out of Egypt and they were in the desert. And they had not been out in the desert all that long, heading toward something new, heading toward a fresh horizon, when they started complaining. And they started talking about how much they wanted to go back and be in a place where they could eat, garlic and onion and leeks for dinner instead of the quail and the manna that God was providing. That tends to be us, doesn't it? Because what is familiar feels secure. What is familiar feels trustworthy. I don't want to miss the lessons that God has had for me on this journey by remembering incorrectly or remembering through a filter that paints everything in a different way than what it really was as we head back out into a world that is opening up. Now, here's another thing I want us to consider. We've talked about what is really our goal as Jesus followers, and that's not just to get things back to the norm, it's to press on. We've talked about what it means to really be thoughtful and to really be truthful about the memories we're bringing to the table when it comes to what we consider normal to be. And then there is this notion of moving forward. I recently had the honor of getting to remarry a couple. This couple are precious friends of mine, and they had been through a really cataclysmic divorce, a really, really tough one. It had arrived through a series of events. The divorce was messy. It was difficult. And those of us who knew and loved them during that season, it was so hard to watch. And in a way that truly, to my mind, is miraculous, God has put this couple back together again several years later now. It blows my mind, all of the things, all of the love, all of the forgiveness, and all of the willingness to press forward that they were willing to do. So when I got to take them back through a covenant ceremony and got to remarry them following this divorce, one of the things that was really dropped in my heart to talk about was the notion that comes from a passage of Scripture in Haggai, which says that the glory of this new house would surpass the former. This couple was not trying to go back to the marriage they had had before. they'd been through too much. What they were so excited about, and the lesson they've taught me, is they were ready to go forward with the marriage God has for them, for the days forward, that the glory of the house they're building now is going to be far superior to the glory of the house they built before, metaphorically. So that's what I want to ask you. As the world starts opening up, as we start going back into offices that feel familiar, back into work relationships that feel familiar, back into social situations that feel familiar, back into faith communities that feel familiar, wouldn't it be great if the glory of the house that's built on this side of things surpasses anything that we thought we had in the former? But what does that take? That takes a willingness to recognize that we're in a new season, a new phase, a new way of doing things, and we are new people in all of that. That's one of the beauties of having walked with this couple. They are so familiar to each other. They're so familiar to me from how I've known them. But because of everything they've walked through, they are also different people than they were at the time of their original marriage. You are different now than before you went into quarantine. You're different. And you get to choose what that different looks like. But it may be that you are different because now you're a little more frustrated than you were going in. It may be that you're different because now you've actually gotten a lot of rest that you really needed that you weren't getting before, and you've had a time to be still. It may be that you're a little more stressed because the financial situation is difficult. It may be that you're more peaceful. Somehow, though, you are coming out the other side of this differently than you went in. And if we're going to make the lessons of this time count, we need to know how it is that we are different walking out the other side. That's part of how we press forward. And we don't put ourselves in a position emotionally and spiritually of going backward. Now, some of you have been thriving during the lockdown. And if you're listening and you're like, oh, Jules, that is not my case. I get it. I understand. But there are people who are saying to me, I think I found my best self during this. I think I had lost view. I'd lost vision of who I really am and how I truly love to do things and what I'm really passionate about. You know, there were those Israelites when their time in the desert was extended. And boy, couldn't we talk about that, right? Like that journey was supposed to be however long, just a few days walk, and it turns into a 40-year meandering. But there were those people that even as their lockdown in the desert got longer and longer, they learned to thrive. There was a generation that figured that out. You know, it was a form of quarantine that they were going to. It was a form of quarantine away from the culture in which God had delivered them, and also an inoculation from the cultures that they were going to go into once they entered the promised land. There was a period of time there where they were able to thrive as a community of people without all of the pressure of these different cultures around them. I want to challenge you to look for the place that you have been thriving during this lockdown, that you're going to carry into the other side as things begin to open up. Where is it, ask yourself, that you've truly thrived? Has your family life thrived? Do not let that go. Has your communication ability with your spouse thrived? Do not let that go. Have your boundaries thrived as you've realized how often your work situation has impeded upon places that it shouldn't? Do not let that go. The Israelites had to learn the art of war in the time that they were wandering in the desert. And them learning the art of war is what they carried into the promised land on the other side of that lockdown. It made them able to fight and fight well against the pressures of the culture that was going to be coming against them once they entered that place on the other side of their 40-year quarantine. You have begun to learn the art of war well in an aspect of your life. during this quarantine that you've been under. Don't let it go. Carry it with you, because there are going to be giants on the other side of this, friends. Even if you feel like things go back to the way they were before, and they're probably not, but even if that's how you feel about it, there are going to be some giants that have to be overcome. Some giants of reality that hit you. Some giants of fatigue that are going to hit you. Some giants of overwhelm as you get back out into more social settings. Some giants of decisions. So take what you have learned during this time and make sure to allow it to let you thrive on the other side. See, this is the fifth thing, the lessons that we want to carry forward. It's in several places in Scripture. It's in Deuteronomy 6. The Israelites were instructed to teach things to their children when they were walking, when they were sitting, when they were at the table, to teach their kids about what God had carried them through, how God had carried them through an unprecedented season. And if we don't carry lessons with us and then communicate those lessons to our kids, can I just tell you, a lot of this experience and the richness of it will be lost. It's part of how we can help manage our anxiety about re-entering and re-emerging in the world, is we gather the lessons so that we can give it a framework. We can give it a purpose this time that we've been under. And so in that way, we can realize afresh things that help us manage the emotions coming to the other side. Look, however many weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, none of us were prepared to do this thing we've been doing. And frankly, I'm not sure a lot of us are prepared to head back out into a world that's going to be very changed. But here's what I know. Here's the lesson I know. We did it. We did it. We were able to make a way. We figured things out and we troubleshot and we dealt with the frustration and we figured out how to do more things online. And we can, with God's help, figure out how to come back into the world. And is there going to be stress? Is there going to be anxiety with it? You bet. But hear me, you did it. And you can carry that as we begin to emerge out of a lot of the lockdown and shelter-in-place mandates that we've had in place. Now, I want to make sure that we all give each other a break, too. Because here's what I'm noticing so much at this juncture. It's fascinating from a sociological and a psychological standpoint. It's heartbreaking as someone who's considered a leader in faith communities, is the way people are emotionally beating at each other up based on where their emotions are about reemerging as the lockdowns begin to wrap up. If you are ready to go, good for you. That's great. And that does not mean that everyone has to be on page with you, and it doesn't make anyone less for not being quite ready to take on the world again. If you are really struggling and you're concerned and you have loved ones who you believe could be really compromised by things opening up again when all of the data and all of the stats and all the research still seem to be so contradictory and difficult to interpret, that's okay. It's understandable. And if you're torn between both, you are kind of okay with being home and you realize the toll it's taking on your friend's business and you hate that for them, and you know based on their personalities they're ready to get back out, that's all good too. Here's the deal. It's not going to be that God takes a look at us and says, oh, those kids were ready to get out, and those kids wanted to stay home, and those kids weren't sure how they felt. It's going to be, how well did we love each other and support each other and show empathy to one another in the midst of however we feel about reemerging into a world that is changed. If you are someone who's ready to get out there, I have a sense that what you're going to be accountable for is how much patience and empathy and kindness you show to someone who's not ready. And if you're not ready, I have a sense that what you're going to be evaluated on is how well you were supportive and kind to someone who disagreed utterly and completely with you and decided to throw open the doors and to go for it. See, it's not how well we think we sound within an echo chamber of everyone who agrees to us. It's how well we can harmonize with those who don't seem to be singing the same note that we are. It's going to take an intentional harmony to accommodate and to honor all of the feelings each of us may have as lockdown begins to unlock. And so I want to make sure that even with those people that I disagree with or I don't understand their emotions during this time, that I'm finding a way to be supportive and kind, that I'm listening well, that I remain curious, and that I remain humble in all of this. We've got lots of great information and posts, and we've got Facebook Lives and all kinds of things on these topics at allmomdoes.com and at allmomdoes on the socials. I want to encourage you to go there, find community there, listen to the different opinions and the different perspectives that people have. It makes us grow. It makes us grow up, which is a great thing. So go check it out. You're going to find great community at allmomdoes, at allmomdoes.com and on the socials. And I would love to hear from you too. I am Julie Lyles Carr at Instagram and on all the social places. I would love to connect with you there. I always want to just give a big shout out to Donna and Rebecca, our producer and our content coordinator. They help make the podcast possible every week, and all of our thoughts and prayers are with you as we all begin the process of discovering what it means to live post-corona. We love you so much, and we'll be right back here next week with another episode of the Modern Motherhood Podcast.